have Christophe, Joe, and Ricardo. So, Christophe, who are you and what do you do?
Yes, I'm Christophe Michel. I'm the head of quantitative research at Crédit Agricole CIB. So many calculation and algorithm.
And specific to quantum or
no, it's
everything?
Yeah, quantum is a late topic, let's say.
How large is your quantum team?
It's 70%.
Wow.
World, yeah.
Amazing. And Joe, who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Joe Ghalbouni, PhD, and I'm the applied quantum researcher at Point72 within their tech innovation team. So Point72 is a hedge fund based in Stamford, Connecticut and New York mainly, with several offices around the world.
And the innovation team is how large?
So we are 12 people at the moment in the innovation team.
Wonderful. But you deal with multiple topics, right?
Yes.
Not just quantum.
Yes.
Very good. And Ricardo, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, right. I'm Ricardo García. I work as a quantum applied researcher as well, so at the Moody's Analytics, which is a risk assessment firm. We have risk analytics tools as well. And basically my role there is to lead the use case development across all Moody's Analytics applications teams and so on.
So I did want to talk about ChatGPT, seriously. And the reason I wanted to talk about ChatGPT is because sometimes we see that innovation budgets are shifting from quantum to other areas. If I were a CIO, I could say, okay, with ChatGPT, I could get an ROI maybe in a year. With quantum, I could get ROI in, who knows, probably more than a year. Do you see that happening?
Not exactly. I think that on our side, of course, ChatGPT is a great area, and we have to focus on that also. But it's one of the tools in the palette. So we have to dig in many areas, and definitely at the end, we are huge calculation time consumer. So any methodology which can help us on this area, like quantum computing, which is promising, we'll definitely have to focus on this. So it's not the only one, but definitely we are not shifting to something else. We are perhaps spreading the areas that we have to look into.
So if you look, say, last year versus today, the quantum investment, has it gone up? Has it gone down? Stayed about the same?
For the moment, it's about the same, but it's more a local, let's say, situation in we have a change of management, so that's the reason why, okay, budget, we are there, etc. But it's something very local. Globally speaking, what is true is that a few years ago, we did not know anything, and now we know more, and we look forward to see many other promising results in this area. So before we didn't know, and now we know that there is something promising. So that's where we are shifting.
Very good. And Ricardo, for you?
Yeah, I think I agree with Christopher. I think that ChatGPT has penetrated, the firm, and there's team looking at the use cases, especially with all the financial reports, summarizing those financial reports. But I still think that technologies such as quantum computing, blockchain, haven't seen a shift in resources. They're still active, and we're considering that we are also a small research team within Moody's Analytics. Yeah.
And Joe?
So since, as you mentioned, the tech innovation team, we are looking at multiple moonshots. So AI has already been there ever since we started the tech innovation team. So we have not seen any shifting from quantum to AI. And as Christophe was mentioning, there's actually now in the quantum ecosystem more maturity in understanding what use cases can bring advantage. So there has not been for us any resources shift.
Well, that's good news for everyone here. You mentioned maturity, so I'm curious to know, on the quantum side, what do you know today that you didn't know a year ago? What's new in your quantum world?
So first of all, coming from academia, I think that we have a different perspective than what the business has and what the business is looking for. So with my experience at Point72, what has been extremely beneficial was understanding how the business works and what are the different areas and use cases where we could really dig deeper and bring a quantum advantage there. And when you look at it from that perspective, instead of arriving to the business with a solution, you create the need from the business and then develop the solution. And that approach has really taught me a lot, because I see things in a completely different way. What matters for the business, obviously, is to bring value, a business value. So if quantum brings that value, and when quantum brings that value, the business are going to be takers. So that's really the way I now understand and view things from a business point of view.
And Michel, what do you know today that you didn't know a year ago?
Well, I don't come from quantum, so I didn't know anything. So it was easy to have a good learning curve on my side. What I know now is that, first of all, what we investigated in was first what we call the quantum inspired. So it was a kind of safe bet, because it works on standard machine and it's not quantum computing, definitely, but it has a lot of added value, and it gives us a lot of, let's say, ideas on the way it works and what is the connection with the quantum world. So that's the first aspect. The second one is to see, and that we made a proof of concept on that, to see that there are some practical cases where a quantum machine can bring something which is consistent with what we can do with something we already well know with our standard algorithms. And we see that, again, we can compare the results, see that it's meaningful, it's decent, and also we see also that if we scale, then we have something which won't be reachable by the standard computers. So it's not the case today, but definitely we see that what is the promise behind the quantum computing, which is that it can address very huge problems. It's something that we think we have some, let's say, argument to say that it could happen, let's say, it could happen depending on the way everything will go on the hardware side. But it's very interesting to see that there are some key topics in terms of algorithm that we need, which has no answer on the standard computing, and which has promising possibilities on the quantum side. So that's something we didn't know. We wanted to be a bit hands-on to understand the way it works, and now we think that definitely it's promising.
And just to make sure I understood correctly, you're saying that you now verified that quantum algorithms can deliver results that are similar, that are maybe accurate, or that are similar to what you do classically, but you'll see the path in which the ability of quantum algorithms surpasses, goes beyond classically. Is that correct?
Yes. In fact, we haven't seen that it goes beyond. We only see that the fact that it seems to grow linearly with 10, 20, 50, 70 qubits. We see that there is something which makes us think that if it's 100, 200, it is okay. It's an extrapolation, I don't know. But with the same kind of figures, we see another shape with the standard algorithm.
And Ricardo?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic, because just adding up on the topic of quantum-inspired algorithms, which I think personally I've been in the last few months exploring, it's the fact that we can draw ideas from quantum physics and apply them to algorithms. It's also, if you think about it, the current state of AI applied to quantitative finance, it has some pitfalls in terms of how it is being applied, and I think some of the methods of quantum inspiring can bring some benefits to the table in regard to AI. For example, financial data has very particular characteristics, right? It's a very low signal-to-noise ratio, it's multimodal data, and basically quantum-inspired ideas, such as tensor networks, can bring not only be at par with AI methods in terms of efficiency, accuracy, but also may bring some other properties, such as explainability, that in finance, explainability is a huge topic, right, from the regulatory point of view, and also that there might be, because of their underlying mathematical structure, they might be more explainable as well and predictable, right? Because we know that in deep neural networks, there's a lot of nonlinear optimization going on. So it's not only computational speed is key in finance, but there are other properties that we have to look after as well.
But I have a friend who thinks that quantum-inspired is cheating. I mean, it's not cheating as cheating. It's cheating because it's not quantum. And the limits of quantum-inspired are the classical limits. So when you work in your organizations, and the organization decided to open a quantum team, and now you come back and say, oh, we have a quantum-inspired algorithm, is that okay for the business? Or does the business care only about, okay, you found a better way to do something? Or does the business want you to really explore quantum technology? Maybe, Joe, you can answer that first.
So this is a great question. Actually, of course, the business is more interested, and that's totally understandable, in what can bring additional value. Now, I don't consider at all quantum-inspired to be cheating for the following reason, because you say that it remains classical within the classical limits, but what are the classical limits? They are merely a conjecture of what we know from the way we have approached problems classically. But with tensor network and quantum-inspired, we have looked at things in a different way. We said, instead of looking at the traditional way to conceive an algorithm, let's get inspired from quantum computing and try to build algorithms from there. And quantum-inspired, for certain use cases, can actually bring a computational advantage compared to the best classical methods we know. We have no idea so far with our classical algorithms if they are the best or not. So quantum-inspired is not really, I would say, cheating per se, especially if for quantum-inspired algorithms, you have the ability to shift to quantum devices and to adapt them to purely quantum devices or even hybrid environment. So that's the first stepping stone, which I think can bring low-hanging fruits for businesses who are looking to add value today and not have to wait for the hardware to mature.
And Christophe, how do you see it?
Well, in average, the management is always okay when it works. So after it's quantum, whatever. But I think there is a link in quantum-inspired algorithm with the quantum general topics, which is the link with the complexity and how to extract the information from a huge number of information which are we don't know. But with quantum, the idea behind is to deal with correlated problems and to extract from there the information which has value. So this is something which is at the end, okay, it's standard. It's not rocket scientist when you know it. But to be honest, before we work with multiverse computing, before meeting them, we didn't know about this technique. And it is definitely something which makes a link with the complexity of the quantum physics and the complexity of the information we have to deal with. So it was interesting in that field.
Your view, Ricardo?
No, I totally agree. I mean, given the pace of development of hardware, it is interesting to see how can we reap the benefits in the short term and quantum-inspired algorithms, which, by the way, I think has been sort of studied in the world of finance from a long time, can bring that to the table. And so I totally agree on that.
Perhaps one additional thing, perhaps I'm wrong, but the idea behind tensor networks is to manipulate tensor, and it's, let's say, eligible to quantum computing in terms of algorithms. So perhaps it's when we'll have much more qubits, but definitely what we can do with this kind of technique is an accelerator of what will be done possibly in the forthcoming years with actual quantum computers.
So I have many more questions, but I wanted to see if anyone in the audience wants to ask our panel anything that's not about Leo Messi. No questions? Anyone? Yes, please?
I'll throw out loud. You said you matured in your understanding of use cases in the last years. Have you, what's kind of the landscape of use cases you have looked into, primarily in quantitative finance or actually beyond that? Because I know originating, first papers in quantum computing have been derivative pricing and these kind of areas. But as we know, there are many, many other, use cases across the entire bank, primarily around AI applications, data science. Have you looked into these as well? What are some of the, sweet spots where you could also do quantum?
So if I can rephrase just for the recording, what are the use cases that you found most maturing? Is it optimization? Is it machine learning? Is it something else? What area of finance are you most focused on? Ricardo, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, I can start off. So in the three big areas, right, simulation, optimization, and machine learning. Simulation, specifically Monte Carlo simulation, is quite a large use case within, especially a risk assessment firm, right? And beyond derivative pricing, there are other sort of pricing models that also need to go the Monte Carlo way, right? And Monte Carlo offers a great flexibility, and it's a formidable challenge to translate that into quantum computing. But we know that the quantum resources for the I wouldn't like to call it quantum Monte Carlo because that has applications in physics. So I would call it quantum-assisted Monte Carlo. Require very large and heavy quantum resources, right? So similar to the kind of resources that are needed for the quantum phase estimations that we've seen in the pharma use cases as well. So it's interesting, what can we do from the QML perspective as well to approximate some of these high-dimensional functions that appear in some of the pricing models through quantum-inspired methods. So I still think that within quantitative finance, without going to more general cases in machine learning, such as forecasting, which is also very of heavy usage within the financial services, there's still some range of applications where we can look at QML as a way to reap the benefits in the short term as well. Right.
And I think speaking with Sergio, your manager, I think he says, we at Moody's, our job is to Monte Carlo everything. And so that's how he describes his job. And how would you describe the areas that you're focused on and the use cases for what you can tell us?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that a big part for the financial institutions like hedge funds is combinatorial problems. So where you have to search for a large space of possible solutions. And the thing is that this space changes a lot depending on the formulation, the constraints that you have. And so this is an area where quantum is very promising because you could either search that space based on annealing models, which we have seen have a tendency to probably bring a bit more the advantage closer than gate models, but also with gate models. So, and to also continue on what Ricardo was saying regarding QML, since you are dealing with a lot of data and since you need to understand everything that is happening to do better forecasting, I think that QML has a very good place also as a use case for finance.
And for QML, are you focused on more on classification or more on prediction?
So I would say for both. Because again, QML to me is like an umbrella for a large number of possible use cases that fall underneath. So anything that can bring value to the business is going to go and seek it.
Very good. And Christophe?
Well, I think that what you mentioned regarding the combination, the digital problem optimization is definitely a great area for the use cases in finance. We had one of our use cases which was about fallen angels, so prediction of the default of future counterparties. But in this also, more generally, we have the question of optimization of a portfolio regarding a given metric. For instance, I want to swap this deal with this other one in a netting set in order to make sure that our capital is, let's say, optimized, that our funding is not too high, etc. So all these problems are very, very, very important because we are talking about scarce resources for a bank, capital and funding, but we are talking also about a problem with a huge complexity, all the deals with our counterparties. So that's definitely an area where the quantum computing can, I think, bring an added value short term. Of course, there are also machine learning everywhere. from pricing, predicting, but also just learning the function that we are currently using for pricing meaning pricing our derivative and hedging them. The idea behind is to do the same thing much faster in order to, that's what we do standardly with deep learning approach, but either with quantum inspired on one side, but also with other approaches more directly quantum computing with, let's say, the basis of function which are available with the quantum computer. We are able to also mimic what we are doing every day, but much faster. So that's some other use cases that we are looking into.
And Ricardo, what do you need to do better quantum Monte Carlo? Do you need quantum Boltzmann distribution? Do you need just larger computers? What do you need to do a better job with quantum Monte Carlo?
Well, first of all, classical Monte Carlos are already a pretty good algorithm for, they're highly parallelizable, and they work on distributed computing environments very well. So, and then you have a lot of setup techniques such as variance reduction to speed up the convergence of those Monte Carlo. So it's a formidable challenge to be able to get that speed up from the quantum computing side. I would say that the need would be on compressing down the quantum circuits that we need for state preparation, for example. So typically in finance, you would be loading a lot of stochastic processes, and then you would be computing some sort of momentum or the average or the quantile of that specific probability distribution. And in order to do that, we actually rely on algorithms such as the one that was commented earlier on the keynote room, the quantum phase estimation, right? So I think that there's still a need for basic research, but we can all sort of benefit from areas such as quantum chemistry where they're trying also to bring down the complexity there as well.
Now, Christophe mentioned time, and I'm curious, maybe we start with you, Joe, when you think about ultimately moving quantum to production, is that for tasks that run once a day, every 5 minutes? Is that on the fraud detection wire where you got the millions of transactions a second? Where does quantum fit or where do you think quantum might fit in the production environment?
So I think, first of all, it's a very good question, because to me, I believe that whenever you have a workflow that is going on, and especially in financial institutions where you have a lot of risk and exposure associated to it, I think it should be as little disruptive as possible. And what I mean by as little disruptive, it's not that the technology does not have an impact, it's just that it should progressively make its way into the workflow. So from what I believe would be the best way when you want to adopt a technology in an existing workflow is, first of all, test that technology from the business point of view. So once you get teams, for example, of risk analysts, of portfolio managers, etc., testing a new solution that is quantum-based, they have to verify it if it works well, and then start to integrate it progressively. So in terms of what are the use cases, or what is the time at which you would need the solution in terms of a refreshing rate, I think it would first start with solutions that do not require an excessive refresh rate at first, because you need to verify the validity. When financial institutions today are working perfectly fine without quantum, we need to show that quantum will add the value, and we need to show that quantum is reliable. And so also to complete on that, I think that in terms of hardware, this is where the fidelity of the gates is extremely important, the fidelity of qubits, the circuit depth that you can attain is extremely important in order for us to run these experiments in I would say, the safest way and the most reliable.
Are you allowed to say fidelity, by the way? Okay. Now, Ricardo and Christophe, do you have a different view on sort of the where you would put quantum in production?
I completely agree with Joe. I mean, in the banking, in the insurance domain, for example, there is a lot of model validation. So there are a lot of complex in-place workflows to actually do this kind of modeling. So when, for example, when you are calibrating your stochastic models to the market condition, etc., there is a lot of validation going on. So we need to first learn how not to be disruptive and break down those processes, right, and integrate quantum smoothly there. So.
Perhaps just to add one word or two on that. In fact, I see two areas where we don't need to be fast, because we need to be faster than what we do. And once we have learned, then we can use what we have learned. So typically when we do deep learning, if we have learned something, what is costly is to learn. Once it's learned, then after it's fast. So the question is, how quantum computing can help us to learn faster? So to learn faster or to learn more complex problems. So that's one area where we don't need to be real time. We just need to spend enough time to learn something faster and more accurately than we currently do with our current device. There is a second area, which is the optimization. I have a portfolio, I have a situation, and I have something which costs capital and funding. And I want to find another, let's say, shape of my portfolio to move swaps of deals here and there, and to with that, if I have a solution, then just to apply it, it's an added value. I don't need to do that real time. If I do that once, I will do that in practice, and I will earn money, capital-wise and funding-wise. So it will be very interesting in that time. For me, I don't forecast to have real-time quantum computing in the forthcoming weeks and months. But I think that it's not a major issue. We have some other possibilities.
And when you think hypothetically about moving quantum to production, once the time is right for you, is the quantum computer on the cloud, or do you need it in an HPC center that's very close to you?
Well, I can answer this. It depends upon the use case. So we'll see. For the moment, we are very happy to have not only the cloud, but also some partners to discuss, because we are, for Crédit Agricole, at a stage where we need to have, let's say, quantum educated person in front of us. We are very familiar with our problems, and we are happy to see the problems of the quantum, and we are not specialists on that. So having said that, definitely, once it's in the cloud, then it spreads the capability to develop things thanks to, I don't know, trainees, PhDs, etc. So definitely the cloud is a good option, but it's also, I don't think that we need to have something on-premise for the moment for the use case that we have.
Do you guys see it differently?
No, I don't think we need an on-premise data center with integrated quantum computer. I think maybe there are some applications in finance where latency can be key, but I think that all the investment that has gone into AI to sort of put AI on the cloud as well, we can sort of also leverage those workflows as well.
Same for you, Joe?
So I see things, I would say, similarly to my colleagues, but in a bit more different way, because I think that today we still do not face the bottleneck of having access to quantum resources. And I think that when this will happen, this will be a very important question to ask whether do we want a system on-prem, do we want to have it on the cloud, and most importantly, on a secure cloud, because we're dealing with financial data. And so it's very important to not have any data leakage. But for on-prem, it raises another important question. And Christophe was talking about the quantum expertise. What do you happen if your machine breaks down? Who do you call? How much exposure will you be at if you're relying on that system and it's down for, let's say, 5 hours, 10 hours, 2 days, 1 week? Do you hire people internally that could solve that problem? Or do you need to have someone fly over another country to fix your machine? So, to me, I think that it might be, in the future, a viable solution to have on-prem and cloud at the same time.
One of the things I like to ask my team from time to time is, what was your high point this week, and what was your low point this week? So let's not take this week, but let's take a longer time frame. If you think about the last 12 months, from a quantum computing perspective, what was your proudest moment, and what are you losing sleep at night because of?
Well, first of all, the high point for me is to feel that definitely there are not in long term real possibility to optimize our scarce resources. That's something that I definitely think that it will be possible. And it's something which is absolutely key for an institution like Crédit Agricole CIB, because that's the blood of our activity. A low point would be potentially all what is, let's say, linked to, I would say, quantum gate in general. It's not low, but it's, I don't have this feeling of short-term possibilities. Having said that, I see a lot of possibilities on the paper, but we haven't experimented, we haven't touched that for the moment, but maybe it's just my view.
And Joe, high point, low point?
So I would say in terms of high point, because having been into the quantum ecosystem since 2010 now, so I'm old. So I'm happy to see how the business is picking that technology and where there are multiple use cases that we can identify and let quantum bring advantage. One thing that I would not really call it a low point, but I would say a concern or something that needs to be addressed when you're in a non-quantum business is to have people from your firm be able to use and leverage quantum technologies. And so it's not always easy to put yourself in the shoes of someone who hasn't been into quantum and be able to offer them a solution that they can use, because quantum can be, I would say, a scary word for people who have never dealt with that technology. And so in order for them to leverage it and adopt it, you need to make it accessible.
Yeah, and for me, a high point would be, since I spent many of the last months talking to many applications teams, there's sometimes explaining them quantum computing can be a challenge, right? And sometimes when you're looking out for problems and use cases where there is, you start saying, okay, I'm looking for where do you have problems in terms of bottlenecks, computational complexity? But sometimes they come back at you with, here's the business case, and here's some data, figure out what to do, right? And I appreciate a lot of their curiosity and how they go about the problems, but it is remarkable to see how many sort of pain points everyone has and how they, the other day I was, just an anecdote, I was thrown out, they were wondering if quantum computing could somehow accelerate homomorphic encryption, right? And I said, okay, that's an interesting topic, but for the moment, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of any leap on that regard. So it's, I would say that's one of my head points.
Before the next question, I wanted to see if anyone from the audience has questions for the panel.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Interesting discussion. This is Gopal. I'm from Nordisk. Yeah, I mean, tensor network has been mentioned several times during this discussion. I would like to know what are the challenges that you face with respect to, is it with respect to the loading of the data, the financial data, or is it with respect to the architecture that you use using tensor networks, which is basically a premise for the quantum machine learning?
Who wants to take that? Tensor networks.
Well, I can take that. So when you mention in terms of the loading, so tensor networks have been once developed for quantum theory, right, as numerical methods to simulate quantum many-body systems as well. In terms of loading the data, since they can actually be applied, in classical CPUs, I don't see any sort of challenges in terms of loading itself the data, right? I think that these are ready-to-go methods, right, in terms of they are applicable now, and what I said before, right, they can, the field, deep neural networks, which have been applied for pricing and so on, which you can train offline and then apply online, right, and they suffer those pitfalls, right, that I mentioned earlier, right, the financial data. Sometimes the amount of historical data you have it's very scarce, right? And that tells you that maybe if tensor networks can bring some benefits to the table, right, in terms of dealing with that type of financial data. But I don't see any sort of challenge in loading the data. I would say more.
Just to add something, I think it's more an enabler than
Exactly.
the idea is that a priori you will learn faster than with standard approaches, and you can address more complex problems. So that's something which is an enabler, and definitely I don't see any blocking points. It's more something that it's a shame not to use.
And was another question? Oh, yeah, please.
Hello, thank you so much for the insights. I have a question. Can you please tell us about, I think all of you guys talked about some use cases that you have done within your institutions. Can you be a little bit more specific about where you found some quantum advantage or promises of quantum advantage? Thank you.
Well, I can start.
Please.
Yeah, so for me, when we are talking about problem with high combinatory complexity, then here, definitely there is a promise to have a quantum advantage. And I think that this is possible, not long term, because at the end, to have, let's say, something like an optimization problem, when it's very hard to have it, then if you have a solution which is provided by a quantum computer, then it's very easy to check if it's good or not. You don't know if it's the maximum, the optimum global maximum, but at the end you can see that it's better than all what you have done already. So and that's something which is very interesting, and so it's on the paper a quantum advantage when we'll have more qubits available, and it's in practice a quantum advantage that you can observe when you have the results. So that's for me, that's something which is again very promising.
Very good. And we had a question there, please.
Hi Yuval, hi everyone. I'm Pierre, I'm the CEO and co-founder of C12. So to deliver quantum value, what do you need? Do you need better quantum algorithm, or do you need better quantum hardware? And if you need better quantum hardware, you mentioned different things, but what do you need specifically? Do you need more qubits? Do you need more fidelity? Do you need more, maybe, connectivity between the qubits? Thank you.
I think the answer is yes. But maybe
I'll be happy to answer that.
How do you know that? It's amazing.
So this is actually a very key question. I believe in terms of algorithms, the algorithms we have been mostly focusing on in terms of the quantum ecosystem for the potential advantage, like for example Grover, Shor, the quantum phase estimation, etc. Many of these algorithms were actually conceived with an idea that we didn't know what a quantum computer would look like. So I think that there's a lot of efforts in the algorithm space for quantum algorithm, like how can we compress those algorithms, how can we make them more efficient, instead of saying we want to adapt the algorithm instead of saying, sorry, we want to build a machine that works for that algorithm, let's see for that machine what we can build to leverage its potential. Because in the end, even NISQ devices that we have today, they are still quantum by nature. So what can we do in order to work with those and potentially have a different direction to enhancing them, and not just solely focus on the fault-tolerant quantum era. And if the fault-tolerant quantum era happens faster than we expect, it's perfect. Everybody will be happy. But if it doesn't, let's see what we can do with these devices today. So I think it's really, like Yuval is saying, it's a yes for both. It's in the hardware and as well in the software. And for the hardware, it's definitely the lifetime of qubits, the circuit depth, the fidelity, etc. Yes, we're allowed to say that. So, yeah.
And so those that listen to my podcast didn't think that the panel would end without me asking my favorite question. So if you could have dinner with one of the quantum greats, dead or alive, who would that be?
Well, Alain Aspect.
Very good. How about you, Joe?
So actually, same Alain Aspect.
Actually, I would go maybe because I've been lately, I read a story about it, Enrico Majorama, so about the topological qubits. He was a physicist, has a very interesting story.
Wonderful. So Ricardo, Joe, Christophe, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.